Breaking. Just 1 minute ago, Britain's unrest erupted into full public view after a royal intervention that was meant to calm the nation instead collapsed under the weight of its own silence. What began as a quiet attempt at unity behind palace walls has now spiralled into the most volatile standoff between the people, the government and the crown in a generation. Tonight, the streets feel charged with something raw and dangerous. Ministers are scrambling, commentators are stunned, and the public, feeling betrayed from all sides, is demanding answers that no one in power seems willing or able to give. For months, the tension had been building, rising prices, failing trust, and a prime minister accused of governing through denial. But when the king finally stepped forward, when he broke tradition to address the growing national anger, the moment that should have soothed the country instead ignited it. His carefully measured words, designed as a plea for calm, landed like a provocation. The government dismissed it within moments. Protest leaders seized on it, and within hours, social media exploded, painting the intervention as everything from a warning to a surrender to a challenge to Downing Street itself. By the time dawn broke, Britain no longer felt stable. Cabinet officials were reported to be in open disagreement, caught between loyalty to a struggling government and fear of appearing indifferent to a nation in crisis. Across the country, the public sensed something extraordinary had snapped. This wasn't just political division, it was a fracture between the old pillars of authority: the crown, the state and the people, each now questioning the legitimacy of the others. And for the first time in decades, ordinary citizens began asking a question that once felt unthinkable. If the royals can't calm the storm, who can? The Prime Minister, already under fire for a string of miscalculations, treated the King's remarks as a breach of constitutional etiquette, an intrusion into political affairs that embarrassed the government on the global stage. Allies whispered that the palace had overreached. Critics swore the government had shamed itself by pushing the monarchy into a role it never wanted. And as competing narratives clashed, it became clear the heart of the crisis was no longer economic or political, but moral. Because what Britain witnessed today was not just turmoil, but humiliation. A nation watching its leaders unravel while the world looked on. Crowds gathered outside Parliament chanting for resignations. Royal supporters accused ministers of disrespect. Government loyalists accused the royals of undermining elected authority. And the country, exhausted by years of chaos, stared into an abyss where the institutions meant to protect democracy seemed instead to be tearing it apart. What made today truly explosive was the sense that no one, not the King, not the Prime Minister, not even the opposition, could claim control of the narrative. Every explanation sounded like an excuse. Every apology arrived too late. Every attempt to restore calm looked desperate. Inside Whitehall, reports leaked of frantic meetings, ministers pacing corridors, advisors warning that the backlash might be irreversible. Some whispered that the Prime Minister had lost the room. Others claimed the monarchy had lost its neutrality. But the public, listening from the outside, didn't hear strategy. They heard panic. Panic from leaders who had forgotten the one rule Britain has always relied on. When the nation loses its grip, someone must rise above the politics to steady it. And yet today, even that ancient expectation collapsed. Protest organisers say the next 48 hours will be decisive. MPs fear a historic vote of no confidence could erupt sooner than anyone predicted. Palace insiders, speaking with unprecedented urgency, warn that the King may be forced to choose between silence and a second intervention, one that could shatter convention permanently. And so Britain stands at a crossroads it never wanted to reach, pulled between tradition and upheaval, between authority and rebellion, between what the crown symbolises and what the government demands. The question now is no longer whether the unrest will grow, it already has, but how far it will go before something breaks for good. The second shockwave hit just after midday when leaked reports from inside Downing Street exposed a truth far more volatile than the public had been allowed to believe. According to senior advisors speaking on condition of anonymity, the royal intervention had not merely been unhelpful, as the Prime Minister's office claimed. It had triggered a full-scale meltdown within the government. In private, ministers allegedly accused each other of sabotaging the response, of mishandling communication with the palace, even of drafting competing speeches in anticipation of the Prime Minister's fall. What had looked like a united front on camera was, behind closed doors, a battlefield drenched in fear and self-preservation. And as these revelations spilled into the press, the country felt another deep jolt, the realisation that its leaders were not fighting for Britain, they were fighting for themselves. Every hour brought a new fracture. Loyal MPs distanced themselves from Number 10. Senior Conservatives whispered that the Prime Minister had become a liability. Opposition figures called the government's handling of the King's speech a national embarrassment, a moment in which constitutional respect had collapsed faster than public trust. And through it all, the palace remained silent, a silence so heavy it sounded like condemnation. Across Britain, the feeling was not just anger, it was betrayal. Ordinary citizens looked at Westminster and saw a government that could not agree even on how to respond to a plea for unity from the monarch. They looked at the royals and saw an institution forced into the political arena for reasons no one would explain. And for the first time, millions began to fear that the system itself, centuries old, stable through wars and crises, was drifting dangerously out of control. Commentators describe the mood as post-authority Britain, a nation where every traditional source of leadership had been shaken. In conversations from London to Leeds, from Cardiff to Aberdeen, people spoke with the same exhausted disbelief. How did it come to this? How did a simple call for calm become a national emergency? But nothing compared to the eruption that followed when footage spread, showing members of the cabinet arguing in the corridors of Parliament, visibly rattled, visibly divided, visibly unprepared for the storm they had unleashed. Within minutes, the clip went viral. Newspapers splashed it across their sites. Comment threads burned with fury. And suddenly, the government's message of controlled stability collapsed under the weight of undeniable chaos. Meanwhile, opposition parties sensed history shifting beneath their feet. Shadow ministers warned that Britain was entering a constitutional danger zone, one where even the tradition of royal neutrality might not survive another misstep. Analysts debated whether the king would be forced to intervene again, something unheard of in modern British politics. Others questioned whether the Prime Minister's leadership could endure a crisis this severe. But beneath every debate, every broadcast, every late-night emergency panel, one truth pulsed like a warning bell. The country was poised losing patience. Faster than the government could issue statements. By evening, thousands had returned to the streets, not merely protesting policy, but demanding a reckoning. Their chants echoed through Westminster, swelling against the ancient stone, a reminder that democracy is not protected by symbols or traditions alone. It lives or dies in the trust of the people. Placards accused the Prime Minister of humiliating the crown, of weaponising the monarchy, of betraying the nation's dignity. Others demanded a general election, and among the crowds whispers grew of a deeper, more unspoken fear that if neither the government nor the monarchy could calm the nation, unrest might escalate into something Britain had long believed impossible. Inside Buckingham Palace, advisors were said to be working through the night. Some reportedly urged patience, others, alarmed by the scale of the backlash, argued for a second address, firmer, clearer, unmistakable in its message. A handful warned that such a move could tear the unwritten constitution apart. Yet doing nothing, they said, might allow the crisis to spiral beyond control. The king himself, always careful, always deliberate, was described as deeply troubled by the violence of the public reaction. He had spoken out to steady the nation, not fracture it. But as the hours passed and as pressure mounted from both supporters and critics, one reality became impossible to ignore. The next words he spoke, if he chose to speak at all, could determine the future of Britain's political order. And all the while, the Prime Minister prepared for what insiders called the most dangerous night of his political life, surrounded by advisers who feared the government was now balanced on a knife edge.